It was just the most massive thing I've ever seen. To tell you the honest truth, I thought, well, we're the only ones left on this planet. Something's happened. It missed something here.
The fear that went in me when I seen it was just like the feeling. I'd say it was fear, but I've never felt that feeling before in my entire life.
It's a weird feeling, like you can't explain it when you don't know. You feel like you're being followed, but you don't know what it is.
We had two to our right, another one in front of us, another one to the left, and another one just across the road, shaking the daylights out of the tree. All we get was a big red eye.
I remember waking up and looking at the end of the bed, and there was a figure there, almost insect-like, and then I blacked out.
Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Cade Moyer, and you are listening to the Believe Paranormal and UFO podcast. If you have had an encounter and would like to share it, please get in touch with me. My email address is believepod@gmail.com. If you enjoy the podcast, be sure to leave us a rating or review wherever you listen, and head on over to our website, believepod.com, and consider becoming a member to get bonus episodes and video content. Tonight I'm joined by Michelle Culdee, and if that name sounds familiar, it should, because her dad has been on the podcast about 1,000 times, and we've tapped out that well, so we're going through the rest of the family. So, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Cade.
It's super cool to have you on, and if you are listening to Tilly, you know I am joking, so you're welcome anytime, but I've got the real jewel of the family on the show tonight, and I'm very excited by that because, you know, Michelle, you're going to give us a completely different perspective of the adventures that you and your family have kind of been on, and there's a fair bit of kind of like folklore that has now been instilled into the podcast from events that your family's basically been I guess the instigators of, which is, I think that's really, really cool. So I'm really excited to kind of get this totally different perspective. But before we kind of dive into everything that kind of makes your family amazing, I really want to talk to you about the encounter that you, I guess, initially contacted me about, because you had quite a terrifying experience when you were just 3 years old. So can you tell us all about this and take us back to when this all happened?
Yeah. So basically, it's one of my earliest memories in general, not just one of my earlier, more creepier experiences. Growing up in the family that I've grown up in, you kind of, like, I wouldn't say get used to the experiences you have, but you kind of acknowledge the fact that it's going to be a regular occurrence. Even going out, for example, filming with my dad, like, I was expecting things to happen. But here I am, 3 years old, and we're living in a 2-bedroom townhouse in a cul-de-sac, and bedrooms are on the top floor, which kind of just overlook the rooftops of the town. And I remember from, it's just weird because, like, you know, as a 3-year-old, you don't expect to remember much, right? As a 20-something-year-old. So, but as I go back in time and kind of relive the experience, what happened was I woke up very, very suddenly in probably the middle of the night. It was dark outside, and there was no real prompt for it. It was just very sudden, and I looked outside my window. The bed is facing towards the window, but the head of the bed is towards the door to the room, and it's a big window. I remember it to me and my 3-year-old brain, it seemed to encompass the whole wall of that side of the house in my room. And as I looked outside, there was this, like, really broad, dark figure floating outside my window, and I could tell it was larger than the average man, just from the sheer, either that or it was just really close to the window. I can't really tell perspective, I guess, in that way, but I remember just feeling this fear this like ultimate child fear, you know, and tried calling out to my parents, but I was kind of frozen at the same time. And that reaction kind of became very repetitive with all my experiences. It's like I want to call out or make some kind of noise, but I'm frozen with fear. And I'm just staring at this thing. I can't tell any features on its face. Like I can't even tell if it's wearing clothes. You know, I can't make out any kind of detail on the body, except it was just this broad, silhouetted figure outside my window, and it felt like it was looking at me, watching me. And I don't know how long I was looking at it. It could have been forever. But then I fell asleep pretty much as quickly as I'd woken up to it. So it was just the weirdest thing. I remember bringing this up to my mum, even just a few months ago. I said, "Hey, Mum, do you remember when I had this experience?" And she's just like, "What? You had this experience?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm certain I've told you this before." And she's like, "No way." So I told Dad. And he's like, "No, you have never told us this story before." And I'm like,
Wow.
"I swear I have. I swear I've told you." Like, it's such a profound memory of mine, you know? But yeah, I haven't actually, yeah, it was weird. And I still think about it to this day, you know?
It's super weird that this is basically your first memory, and I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with my memory, but I swear my earliest memory would be something when I'm like maybe 10 years old. And I always get quite envious when I hear people like yourself who have these, I wouldn't say wonderful memories, but rather incredible retellings of events, you know, that happened when they're so young. And for me, you know, really does add a lot of credence to those situations, because it's almost like a core memory is being burnt into you at such a young age.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, yeah, not a positive first memory, that's certain. But it's one, I think, that kind of just, I guess, solidified what the rest of my life was going to be like. You know, like constantly having these strange encounters popping up over and over and over again throughout my life. But I'd never seen it again afterwards. I've never seen it or really experienced anything similar like that later. So it was just a freakish one-off, you know, odd thing that happened. Yeah.
It is weird, you know, like that you never really saw this thing again, because, you know, it goes to show that this isn't like a haunting or anything like that. Like, it's potentially nothing to even do with the house. And I guess the scary part is that it's everything to do with you as an individual.
I mean, they sometimes say that, you know, it's not places that are necessarily haunted. Sometimes it's people. I don't think I'm haunted personally. But in saying that, I do believe that people are haunted or can be haunted. That is either by experiences or, you know, something. But like, if someone's had consistent experience over and over and over in their life, no matter where they've moved to, if they've moved to the other side of the world or, you know, whatever, that means that whatever that is, I would say, is attracted to that person. So... But I think in my instance, or in the instance of my family, it's just we're haunted by multiple things. we're haunted by the fact that, you know, we're haunted by experience more so than actual, like, you know, beings or whatever, because where we go to places, things happen.
Yeah, well, the thing with your family is that everyone seems to be bloody adrenaline junkies, and they don't seem to say no to, you know, any type of terrifying adventure, because you guys always seem to dive headfirst into, you know, any kind of building or situation. I mean, like, you're just kind of telling me before we hit record that your family went to Chernobyl to just go check it out type of thing.
Yeah, it was part of the Ghosts of Europe doco. We decided to include that because it was such a momentous part of European history, and because we were looking for, you know, ghost stories of Europe, or ghosts that haunt areas of Europe that's quite renowned for certain events, we thought it might be appropriate to start there, to highlight the history and what happened. But yeah, even that was such a, I guess, I'd say momentous. I think for us, like it definitely left its mark on all of us. And I think any kind of experience you have in that regard is going to leave a mark on you.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Chernobyl was one of the greatest, I guess, tragedies of recent history, and the fact that it's, you know, still so incredibly dangerous today, you know, really does say a lot about the catastrophe that happened on that, I guess, that fateful morning. But it is something that really intrigues me, because I think there would just be so much kind of, I don't want to sound disrespectful when I say this, but almost like residual energy from all the people affected there, because you hear of places that have great tragedies happen and you can almost just feel the sorrow there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the places that we visited where there has been particularly horrible events take place, you can feel it. Like, it's in the walls, you know, it's on the floorboards that you walk on, it's in the air you're breathing, in the space. Like, yeah, it's just, when you go there, it's hard not to be affected just by the history of it.
It's such a crazy thing that your whole family decided to make a documentary on the ghosts of Europe. Like, how does that happen?
Well, it was Dad's idea, and he invited me to be photographer for it. So it wasn't the whole family. It was half of us, but we had other crew with us, and I think the idea came about because, you know, he grew up, or spent a lot of his childhood in Hungary, which is right next door to Ukraine, and he was in Hungary when both my parents were. My mum grew up, she was born in Hungary, grew up in Hungary. They were there when the actual disaster took place.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So they were literally right next door on the other country over, across the border, when the actual events took place. So, I think he always had that kind of intrigue about what happened, what caused this great disaster. And so it was kind of, it made sense, I think, to do a documentary that at least started there and moved on. But I mean, yes, it's part of pop culture. It's there's a docuseries about it, like, a drama series by HBO. Like, there's all of that. I think there's a great amount of intrigue about it, but when it comes to, I think, looking at the, I don't know, like, I wouldn't want to go so far as to say ghosts, because it's like metaphorical ghosts, I think. You know, maybe if it's not actually haunted, but like, it's haunted by objects that haven't moved, you know, for over 30 years, like radioactive dust that's kind of laying on the ground of the places you walk in. Like, it feels haunted, but not by ghosts.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And that HBO series that you mentioned, like, it really does do a really fantastic I guess, way of painting that picture, because you're right, it's haunted in a completely different sense, that, you know, there's not ghouls and things kind of floating around. I mean, who knows, they could be, but it's a different type of haunted feeling in a situation like that.
Definitely.
So I guess having the family aspect of your life, how does that kind of affect you, like, as a person? Like, I would imagine that you kind of have this genuine natural curiosity to the world of the unknown, the paranormal, UFOs and things like that. Where does that all kind of sit in, I guess, in your life?
That's a really good question. And kind of a long one to answer, I think, so I hope you don't mind.
No, it's why I asked it.
Going back, into my own personal history there, I think growing up with it was tough, for sure. Like, I was always, like, going to school and stuff like that. I was jeered at and made fun of and bullied for that kind of thing because everyone knew who my parents were. And I never resented them for it because for me, it was one of the coolest things ever, like being a teenager or being even like a little kid. And, your dad makes documentaries about the weird and wonderful. And, your mum's a psychic medium who, helps him in these investigations. And, when they're looking for when they're looking at like paranormal occurrences and stuff like that, for me it was the coolest thing, like living in a sci-fi. But for all the other kids, I don't think they really understood, and they might have even been afraid. I don't know, but it definitely meant I didn't have a lot of friends. And it made high school awkward, I think. Being a teenager and being excluded can be quite I don't want to go so far as to say traumatizing, but it definitely leaves a mark on you, especially when you're trying to come into your own as a teenager and, trying to understand who you are and what you're going through and all that kind of stuff.
And then to have these really obscure activities kind of just go on around you would really make that a very, I guess, tough time to kind of get a grasp on who you are as a person too.
Yeah, I think definitely. Like, I mean, you've got this extraordinary part of your life happening, and then you have to kind of return to ordinary life, going to school and, studying and all that kind of stuff. So, as an adult, I definitely appreciate it a lot more, I think. I kind of care less about other people's opinions on that matter. Like, I don't go around advertising it. Not because I'm ashamed of it, but I feel like, it's not really of anyone's business unless they want to know. If someone wants to know about that part of my life, then they're absolutely free to ask me about it. So it was complicated for a while, I think, on an emotional and mental level. But then after a while, I kind of just started appreciating the fact that people who knew about it didn't treat me any differently. Which was something that I did experience growing up. But I had the wonderful support of my parents and my brother. So I knew that I could trust them the most through all of this. And at the end of the day, I still get to go out, to abandoned buildings, spend the night in those abandoned buildings. I got to do all these really, really cool things. And no one could really take that away from me. So that helped. So yeah, it was like this weird tug of war, I think, throughout my life, but definitely have figured it out now. So,
do you feel the paranormal is like and I use that as a very, very blanket term, because I guess the paranormal for me kind of covers Yowies, the spiritual world, and also like UFOs. So it for me, it's an all-encompassing term. But in saying that, do you feel that is just a part of your life now? Because the history that you've had growing up, and there's a couple of things that I'll probably ask you a little bit later that kind of correlate back to stories told on this podcast. But is it something that you found has kind of just ingrained itself into your life as a everyday thing almost?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Like, my partner who I'm with right now, he knows about my history with that. And we've had experiences together even. So even with friends, it's the same thing. They know about it. And, when we've gone to places that, I thought to have an interesting past or history, and they've had experiences, they've felt comfortable to share it. And then again with my family, like for us, it's like, oh yeah, you wouldn't believe I saw this weird light in the sky the other day. And my dad would be like, oh really? That's cool. Tell me about it. We'd have a casual dinner conversation. So I think it's absolutely just a regular part of my life. Yeah, I think I wouldn't have it any other way. I definitely think it's shaped who I am and the kind of work that I do personally, and how I work with my dad. Absolutely, 100%. Would I exchange it? No. I'm quite happy being the weird one or the odd one out in that regard. I think, just experiences like with Ouija boards or like haunted places or like, interesting lights in the sky, witchcraft, like all that kind of stuff is adds, I don't know how to explain it. It's just,
I think it adds character to a person, and you get to do in my opinion, you get to do the coolest things that someone could ever do, because a lot of people would love to go into a haunted house. A lot of people don't really have the balls to do it, but you're like gung-ho and just going, yeah, we're not just going to go to the haunted house. We're going to bloody stay in there overnight. We'll stay in there all weekend, and we're going to videotape everything that kind of goes on. And for me, I think that's super, super cool.
Yeah, that's definitely my parents' influence, I think. Like they've been the bravest people in my life, like, seeing the stuff that they've gone through even when I haven't been there, what they've experienced. And I'm just like, wow, that's just the coolest thing on the planet. And then having them back me up when I want to do the same, I couldn't have asked for anything better, to be honest. Very lucky in that regard, I think.
How old were you when you realized that your life wasn't like everyone else's, and that you guys were maybe a little bit more special than the regular family?
Oh, geez.
Because I could imagine there would have been a period in your life where you would have realized that, hey, little Sally, my friend, doesn't see the same things, and her dad doesn't do the same things, and her mum definitely doesn't talk to the ghosts in the corner. So
oh gosh, I'm just trying to think. I think that's a really hard question to answer, because I'm like trying to go back, and every like memory of my childhood, I'm just like, no, wait, that wasn't the first time. Go back. I don't know. It would definitely have to be, I think, when I think at school, when people approached me about it, and made me feel different.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who has had these kind of experiences happen throughout their life could probably relate to that. I think a lot of people who've grown up in a haunted house, or who've had a history of seeing lights in the sky, would have had moments where, especially in childhood, where they felt alone or excluded. But I would have to say that would probably have been the first time. I was even saying primary school, because kids are cruel,
Yeah.
So when you're different, they like to kind of make you aware of it. So I think it's probably the first time. Yeah.
For me, it's something that because not to say that I have a life that parallels Attila at all, because I'm not that mad, and I mean that in the best way. But my life is kind of full of these weird occurrences, and my daughter, she'll say, "Oh, Dad, you're so weird," and I always like to instill into her that it's better to be weird than boring.
I agree. Oh no, 100%. Like, I think, it just makes you such a more interesting person if you're called weird. Being called weird, I think, is definitely a compliment. I used to think otherwise, but now I definitely see it as a compliment, because it means that, like you said, you're not boring. People will find you interesting, but at the same time, I think people will be more comfortable sharing their own experiences, or even asking you for a favor. Like, for example, so my mum practices witchcraft, for example, and in high school, when people found out, most of them were very terrified. There were rumors going around, that, Michelle's mom's got a book of spells. And when it came back to me, someone came after like, so I heard that your mom's got a book of spells. And I'm like, yeah, she does. She's got more than one book of spells. She's got a whole entire bookshelf of spells. What's the point? But at the same time, people come up to me and be like, hey, can I ask you for a favor? Is there a spell you can do for this? Or, can you make this person fall in love with me, kind of stuff. It was so funny. And all the time, be like, yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely, I can do that. I'd never do it, obviously, because, one, I wasn't mad. And two, because, it's more funny to troll the people who are, go out of their way to make me feel excluded.
Yeah. It's something that you totally should have just hustled them. Yeah, $100 and Joey Smith, he'd totally fall head over heels for you. You just gotta transfer that over tonight, and they'll make that happen.
Oh my gosh, I wish I was that smart in high school to have figured that out.
So yeah, one of the things I do want to ask you about is like the floating figure that you saw outside your window when you were 3 years old. I have an encounter that your father had out at Hill End with a floating figure. And it kind of blows my mind that he only recently just found out about your encounter. Did he ever make any connections to that? Or did he ever share the story of seeing this floating entity out there with the family?
Yes, he did share it with us when he came home from that expedition. I remember he went into detail. It was probably one of his more impactful experiences he'd had to date at that point. So naturally he was keen to share it with us all. I'm not sure if he made the connection between that experience and what I saw. To be honest, we didn't really talk about it. I think he was more interested in documenting that experience that I had, which is fair enough because that's his trade. But in terms of what he saw, even I didn't make the connection until I listened to that episode, actually. I was listening to it and I'm like, wait a minute, this is almost the exact experience that I had as a kid. I think it's really, really odd, especially because that sensation of almost foreboding that he was feeling, I had felt as a kid. So it's definitely a conversation I need to have with him soon to talk about, because going back to what I said before, sometimes people are haunted instead of places. I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know, it's definitely weird, but the similarities are kind of just a bit too uncanny for my liking.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's nothing that kind of, I feel like, doesn't shake the Attila family too much, but when he was telling that story, it sounded like he was kind of shaken up about it. And I got a note here that you were kind of frozen with fear, and that's kind of been your natural reaction kind of moving forward. It just kind of stood out for me as something rather similar, which for me, I don't know if weird synchronicities like that in the paranormal happen too often.
I think yeah, I mean, my life's full of weird synchronicities, to be honest. Lots and lots of them. But in that regard, I think, yeah, to be honest, I'm just racking my brain right now thinking about it. And because there have been other instances of weird, floating type stuff that we've experienced at separate times as a family, and it's not sure if that is even connected or what, but what he saw, he got a much closer what's the word? What's the expression I'm after?
His experience was really close. It was right in front of him.
Yeah, it was right up close. So yeah, like, I don't know, my brain's kind of just like, whoa, at the moment.
No, I couldn't imagine. Hopefully,
the-
I'm not opening too many rabbit holes for you to jump down. But
No, it's too late. You've done it. We're here now.
oh dear, here we go.
I'll call my dad right after this. have a conversation. Like,
Dad, I was just talking to Cade, and he said this, this, and this, and now it's making me think this.
oh gosh.
I apologize in advance there, Attila. But I do want to ask you, because one episode on this podcast is rather famous at this stage, and it's a two-parter called Australia's Skinwalker Ranch. And
yep.
this one blew a lot of people's minds. It actually blew up a recording device that I had, which is why we had to split the recording over 2 nights, because I had a lot of really, really, really weird activity happening on my end, like knocks on the walls, knocks on the roof, knocks on the windows. My electronic equipment was kind of playing up. From memory, your dad was like, had his headphones ripped off his head or something like that. It was something like really, really spooky, like, was going on when we were recording that episode. And he mentioned this creature that he saw in the grass, and he I don't remember if he said this on the episode, but I know he told me personally that you were one of the people that witnessed this thing on that very, very eventful day. Are you able to kind of give us what your perspective was of this kind of creature dragging itself through the field? And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Also, are you wanting more content? Why not become a Believe Plus member? You'll get access to exclusive podcasts and episodes that aren't available to the public. Not only that, you'll also get our regular feed without any ads. Head to believepod.com/plus to sign up today for just $5 a month.
Yeah. So this particular location is infamous for the level of activity that occurs there. And Dad had been investigating that place over a number of years, I think since 2006. And it was almost like the level of activity just increases every time he visits. So I started going with him when I turned 17 because I wanted to. I was very curious, you know, this place that had pretty much changed my dad's perspective on the paranormal entirely, or at least solidified for him the fact that, you know, shit, this is real. So I was really curious, went with him. And we'd filmed there a number of times, and this night we were filming a section. We were also doing an investigation. So we were filming a segment, is what I meant. We were filming a segment and also doing an investigation, and things are getting pretty serious inside the complex. Sorry, sometimes I laugh when I get nervous or when I'm talking about something.
No, that's totally fine.
So, yeah, it wasn't funny. I'm just putting that out there. It was not funny. So we went outside to kind of just take a break because it was getting too much and we were starting to feel quite tired, which is, again, quite normal. And we were standing in like a grassy patch. There was like a gravel, it was like a driveway. We're sitting in a grassy patch. There's a light behind us shining onto the gravel. Very typical horror movie setting, to be honest. And so we had myself, Dad, and 2 crew members with us, and I was facing towards the gravel that was lit up by that side lamp, and we're having a casual conversation. and all of a sudden, from the side of the complex, I saw this, I don't know how to I wouldn't even say creature, I don't know. It was like humanoid, definitely, but it was just a torso up, so it didn't have any legs. It was using its forearms to pull itself across the driveway, and like using its forearms to crawl across. It had a head, arms, and just the torso, and I could even hear the gravel moving as it was moving, and I remember freezing and calling out. And as I called out, the other crew member who's sitting next to me, she called out at the same time, and we basically just freaked out at that point. By the time my dad and the other crew member turned around, the thing had already disappeared onto the other side into the bush. But it was clearly humanoid. It was a dark figure. Like, it was so detailed, you could see the light bouncing off of it, you know? So it was definitely physical. It was probably one of the most real and physical encounters I've ever had in my life. And for months afterwards, I had nightmares. I still sometimes have nightmares about it to this day. And it happened like 9-10 years ago now. Yeah, it was incredibly a profound experience. Like, I'd seen other really scary things at that place before, but I think that was probably the scariest, especially because it's like, in your head, you're kind of processing, wait a minute, okay, it's human, because it looked human, but it's only half of the body's there. What the hell? And I'd never seen anything like that again afterwards. Never saw it there again afterwards. And visiting that same area after, on investigations we did in later dates, I still kind of struggled to go back to where that happened because I was so scared. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty shocking encounter, and to encounter something like that really doesn't fit the box of anything, I think makes it really, really scary. The fact that this thing was a physical kind of entity or creature or whatever it was, because it was interacting with the environment around you. Even though you're a believer in the paranormal and you've kind of encountered so many things in your life up to that point, I imagine that it still would have been almost like a paradigm breaking situation, because that is just so out of the normal.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that there's no such thing as like a typical haunting, but even I would say in this instance, it's not like a cookie cutter paranormal experience. And I say that because, like, you know, I don't think it was a ghost. Well, like the typical definition of a ghost. I don't think it was that. Do I think it was half a human? Like, you know, crawling around the complex and crawling around into the national park? I have no idea. I kind of wish I knew what it was, because maybe then, you know, could lay that memory to rest almost. But yeah, like I said before, I'd seen so many just out there things and really, really scary things at that place, but it doesn't come close to how physical that thing was.
It's kind of like it was fear itself, like, and that's the impression that I kind of get, is that whatever this thing is, it is just manifested to be the most terrifying thing imaginable.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time someone's actually said that about that place, that, you know, they've seen something that was fear itself. Yeah, that's an expression that's, I think, commonly used from people who visited that place. I think even Dad's used that a couple times, to be honest. But I'd have to agree, for sure.
What does it do to you as a person, like after you kind of encounter something like that? Does that really make you think that, you know, nothing's off the table? Because, you know, the Coldy family has kind of encountered everything. You know, you've encountered Yowies, you've encountered UFOs, you've encountered the most haunting of haunted places, and dealt with poltergeist activity and potential demonic possessions and things along those lines. Because what does that do to you? Like, does that just make you think, geez, what's next? Like, what is anything impossible?
Yeah, I've tried to break that down myself, to be honest. I really want to understand, like, you know, this is the kind of stuff that you see in horror movies, for example. Like, if people saw that kind of stuff in real life, would it traumatize them, you know? And I think there are certain experiences that people have that does traumatize them, at least for long periods of time. Or, you know, for example, I had nightmares for such a long time after experiencing that. And even, you know, now, like almost 10 years later, I still sometimes dream about it. So I think it definitely leaves some kind of mark on you. And I don't think that's talked about enough, to be honest. I do think people need to open up more about the kind of long-term effects it can possibly have on your mental health, having these kind of experiences, especially if someone's having repeated or recurring experiences. Like some people, you know, experience abductions over and over and over and over again. Like, what does that do? You know, or if someone is plagued by poltergeist activity in their home, you know, like what does that do to them? And it's something that I want a conversation around, I think, for sure.
I'm with you 100% on that. And the thing that I really always try to hit home when, you know, I talk to people who have these like particularly out of the box encounters is that, you know, these encounters have a real life effect on people. Like, it's not, oh, I just had this super scary encounter and that's it. My life is continuing on its way. It's, well, no, this has affected someone right down to their core. It's turned their world upside down, and, you know, they potentially have to live with it day in, day out. And how do you share that with the world without coming across like a, you know, someone who's off their meds or needs to be on meds? It's a really, really difficult situation for people to be in. And, you know, even after they're potentially out of those situations, there's every chance they could have PTSD from it as well.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I mean, I think people would struggle with, for example, seeing a traditional psychiatrist about this kind of stuff, because traditional psychiatrists don't necessarily have knowledge on how to deal with these kind of experiences beyond medication, you know, because for them, it's not, you know, they don't know. I can't, of course, talk for every psychiatrist or, you know, anyone else who works in the mental health sphere, but, you know, then I know for a fact that they're not prepped enough to look after people who've had life-changing experiences in the paranormal sphere and world. And I think like there are definitely support groups. I know that for a fact. There are groups who do investigations, you know, who go to residential properties and, you know, try to help families and whatnot. But at the same time, like, I think these people need more long-term support. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist either, so I can't vouch for that. But I think I definitely think there needs to be a deeper conversation about how to better support people who've had experiences that have definitely left a mark, not necessarily a pleasant mark, on their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the thing is, the internet, as much as you love it or hate it, depending on what your point of view is that, it can potentially just bring these people together and create fantastic support groups. I guess the other side is of that coin is if you jump into any paranormal group on Facebook, they almost become echo chambers of orbs and dust and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, you can't always guarantee that they're going to be the most helpful. I think there are fantastic people in the paranormal field, absolutely, definitely. But then I think there are also those who may exaggerate or inflate things and aren't necessarily interested in helping people. It's in that regard. But I definitely think there needs to be more support for, I don't want to call them people victims. I think that's such a weird term in this case. I think
experiences is what I would call them.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah, pretty much. I think fellow experiences have some kind of support group or a network where, we can discuss this and feel less alone, I think, is another big one.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's such an isolating thing, because the paranormal can be a real prick. And I don't
That's
mean
a way of putting it.
Yeah, I don't mean to make light of it, but I recently learned that the paranormal can, show itself to just one person in a whole family. And my God, what a shit situation to be in, is that you're the only person who can see or feel, or you're having the encounters and no one else is aware of it at all. And that's simply by choice of, this potential entity doing that. And for me, that's bloody scary, because I reckon there would be people who have been shipped off to the loony bin because of situations like that.
Oh yeah, I've heard stories. Actually, Dad's told this really interesting story where he used to know someone who worked as a mental health nurse, and the nurse he was psychic, so he would see things, be able to sense things, that kind of thing. And one time he was working in the ward and he looked up to see this, I think it was like a black smoke or black figure in smoke, something like that, behind someone in a wheelchair. And the person in the wheelchair was being pushed by another nurse. And so my dad's friend was looking at this, smoke figure, quite shocked. And the woman sitting in the wheelchair looked up at him and said, "You can see it too, can't you?"
Oh, wow.
And he just, and she was just wheeled away. And he was just shocked, because it's just oh my God, what the hell? So ever since I heard that story, I'm just I wonder how many people are actually, they're genuinely experiencing stuff. They've gone out to look for some kind of help or support, haven't gotten it, and instead have been, I don't know, recommended to go to a mental health facility or put on medication and stuff like that. Not just, I'm not bagging out medication, because medication does work for people. But I think, those who are having experiences of the more extraordinary nature, I think need to be with others who are also experiencing similar stuff. I think that's probably the best treat. Again, not a psychologist, so I can't start treating people. But like I said before, I definitely think it's an important conversation to have.
Yeah, definitely. And everything that we've kind of talked about absolutely does not take away that mental illness is a highly influencing factor when it comes to people and paranormal experiences, or believing they're having paranormal experiences, because at the end of the day, that's always an option that could genuinely be happening as well.
That's true. I think it definitely needs to be considered. Someone's mental well-being definitely needs to be considered in these kind of circumstances, but it's mostly for the safety of the person. I definitely think, they should be validated and, looked after and whatnot. And in some cases, maybe someone is experiencing complications due to mental health. And then other times people are experiencing genuine encounters, or there could be a mixture of the two. But at the same time, like, how are we supposed to determine that? Like, how do we determine whether or not someone is, just having, like I said, complications of mental illness, or if they're genuinely seeing something like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would not like to be the person who makes that call, because it would be an impossible one to really do. It's it really is a rabbit hole of when you go down the whole paranormal encounters, mental illness, and then is there a crossover between the two? Because there definitely could be. It's it is a fascinating type of topic to talk about, and I think I could talk about it for hours, to be honest. But
yeah,
Michelle, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You are really, really cool to talk to. Much cooler than your dad, let's just put it out there.
Yeah, I'm the cool one.
But where can people find out more about what you do? Because you're very much in the same realm that your father kind of does, documentary filmmaking. You're really hop skipping away. You're pretty much doing the same thing. So where can people find out a little bit more about what you do? Potentially, if they want to contact you in regards to anything we've potentially spoken about, is there a way they can do that?
Yeah, so I'm currently doing a master's in documentary production, so I'm mostly focusing on documentary and photography. But if you do want to contact me about, that kind of world, or if you want to support my work, you can find me on Instagram. The Urban Dystopian is the brand name I go under. And of course, you can contact me through my website, which is under the same name. So, yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Believe Paranormal and UFO podcast. If you have had an encounter and you would like to share it, please get in touch with me. My email address is believepod@gmail.com. Finally, don't forget to follow us on all our social media outlets, and be sure to join our Discord server to talk to other listeners of the show. You'll find all these links in our show notes. Thank you.